Sometimes in the development of video games, things slip through the cracks, and for better or worse, players are able to catch a glimpse at some inside baseball, behind-the-scenes sights that they clearly weren't supposed to see. In most of these 10 examples, the developers moved fast to cover up their gaffes, swiftly patching these elements out of the game, confirming beyond any doubt they were not intended for players' eyes. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 things video games really didn't want you to see. Number 10, a Left 4 Dead prototype, Counter-Strike Condition Zero. The 1.6 update for Counter-Strike Condition Zero released last November and also added a most peculiar feature to the legendary FPS, a very early prototype of Valve's 2008 zombie-themed FPS Left 4 Dead. The prototype, called Terror Strike, was accidentally compiled into Counter-Strike by Valve during the 1.6 update, allowing players to experience an extremely rudimentary version of Left 4 Dead's gameplay. Using Counter-Strike assets, players must fend off a horde of AI foes programmed to attack them with the rabid ferocity of, you guessed it, zombies. Valve didn't take long to remove Terror Strike from the game, but by this point, slippery-fingered fans had already copied it and created their own unofficial Counter-Strike mod, effectively allowing it to be preserved in perpetuity. Even though Valve evidently didn't want this early slice of Left 4 Dead's development to be made public, it's now a piece of public gaming history they can't ever hush up, so they're probably better off just embracing it. Number 9. Brainiac spoils future DLC. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Because Kill the Justice League's launch hasn't been enough of an easily foreseen calamity, the game itself even hilariously decided to spoil some future DLC for players. Mere days after launch, players began reporting that during the climactic boss fight against Brainiac, there was a chance the supervillain would drop the line, "I didn't expect you to be the weak link in this chain freeze." If you can manage to make sense of the game's ludicrously cluttered UI, you can confirm that Brainiac did indeed say freeze in the game's subtitles. Yet given that Mr. Freeze is categorically not in the game at launch, this is 100% a screw up on Rocksteady's part. While a content roadmap released prior to the game suggested that Freeze would be showing up at some point, he clearly wasn't supposed to be explicitly name dropped at this point, confirming beyond any doubt that he will indeed be playable in a future DLC. Number 8, the Valkyrie groping animation, For Honor. Remember For Honor? Ubisoft's historical themed action game ended up in hot water in November 2017, some 8 months after release, when the studio released a new execution animation for the Valkyrie hero class. The execution, called No Touching, sees the Valkyrie mortally stab an adversary in the gut, and in their dying moments, their hands happen to fall on the Valkyrie's breasts. The soldier then tries to apologize before the Valkyrie swiftly kicks them in the knackers and knocks them out. Now, is this animation the most offensive thing in the world? Absolutely not. But it is juvenile, regressive, and a little bit corny in the modern gaming era. According to Ubisoft, who removed the animation a mere hour after it was released, the execution hadn't yet been approved and was, quote, incorrectly made available in-game. The next month, they released a revised version of the execution in which the dying soldier clambers onto the Valkyrie's shield instead. Number 7, an unintended first-person mode, the Ascent. Now here's a really interesting one. When a bug causes a game to gain a new mode that the developers had no intention of ever including in said game. That's precisely what happened to cyberpunk action RPG The Ascent, as mere days after launch, Redditor Sokolov RDZ encountered a glitch which suddenly changed the top-down perspective to first person. Though the character's face regularly clips through the camera in this quote-unquote mode, and the top-down nature means there aren't any skyboxes visible, for the most part it actually does look surprisingly good, as though it were basically an unofficial addition to the game. The bug didn't occur with enough frequency among the player base for developers Neon Giant to even bother officially addressing it, though it was likely removed during one of the Ascent's many post-launch patches. And sadly, despite the bug's discovery spurring a vocal interest in a first-person mode for the game, it never materialized. Number 6, the unused Caroline dialogue, Portal 2. Portal 2 reveals that the personality of malevolent computer system GLaDOS actually came from a woman named Caroline, who was the assistant to former Aperture CEO Cave Johnson. It's a disturbing enough revelation in the game proper, but when players took a dive into Portal 2's system files, they found a wealth of unused dialogue which only made the implication that much more unsettling. Numerous lines have Caroline vocally protesting, saying, "Mr. Johnson, I do not want this," which sounds incredibly suspect suspect by itself, but when you consider that Caroline most probably had her consciousness forcefully inserted into GLaDOS, it becomes a whole other flavor of disturbing. Fans have speculated that the game originally showed Caroline being turned into GLaDOS at Cave Johnson's behest, but for whatever reason, Valve decided to cut it. Maybe because it was way too scary. In the very least, these clips remain in Portal 2's files to this very day and haven't been removed by Valve, even if they're not likely thrilled about enterprising fans peeking around in the guts of their masterful platformer. Number 5, an accidental swastika, Fortnite. Fortnite being the absolute cultural juggernaut that it is, it's incredibly important that Epic Games knows precisely what content it's pushing to the public to ensure that nothing unsavory ends up slipping in, especially with so much of its player base being children. In June of 2018, Redditor EU Best City EU discovered that by placing 4 metal floors next to one another and editing them into a circle, a symbol that looks distinctly like a swastika would be formed in the middle. The Reddit post quickly went viral, enough so that Epic swiftly offered a response, assuring players this was an unintended result of the floor's warped geometry and would be removed from the game ASAP. Within a matter of days, Epic had altered the metal floors to bend slightly upwards, ensuring they no longer formed what appeared to be a symbol of hate. Given the potential for such an issue to be blown wildly out of proportion by the mainstream media, especially when targeting parents of Fortnite players, this one was actually resolved in a pretty swift, sensible, and drama-free fashion. Number 4, all of the hidden loot, Dead Space 2. From swastikas to something decidedly less harmless now, but all the same, prepare to have your mind blown by this one. Earlier this year, Redditor WeTodd1337 went viral on the Dead Space subreddit after discovering that damaging the ATMs and medical stations strewn throughout Dead Space 2 will reward players with a ton of useful loot, including a stonking 10,000 credits apiece from ATMs and stasis packs from med stations. This left fans positively shook that so many goodies have been hiding in plain sight for almost 15 years, largely undiscovered. But it gets better than that. Whoever programmed this in the game was incredibly sneaky about it, given that even members of the Dead Space 2 dev team have only just now found out. Seth Hall, who worked as a visual effects artist on the game, entered the Reddit thread in question and revealed they also had no idea about the loot. Clearly someone at Visceral Games got a real kick out of this secret, which has now finally been brought to light for the masses. Number 3, the Danny Trejo mission, Far Cry 6. Now, it wasn't at all a secret that Danny Trejo would be appearing in Far Cry 6, given that Ubisoft announced this prior to the game's release as part of their content roadmap. But we weren't supposed to get our hands on it quite so soon, as in a November 2021 update, mere weeks after the game's launch, a bonus mission starring the Machete actor was inadvertently released early for all to play. The mission, called Danny and Danny vs. Everybody, involves players protecting Trejo while he cooks up some tacos, cause why the hell not? But rather than simply let the premature content drop lie, Ubisoft ended up releasing another update which revoked access to the mission. The final version of the mission, implying the leaked one was an incomplete build, was released the very next month, but due to the limited licensing agreement between Trejo and Ubisoft, it was permanently removed from the game a year later. Boo. Number 2, the secret debug menu, Marvel's Spider-Man 2. As basically seems like a miracle for AAA games these days, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 had a largely smooth launch, yet Insomniac Games ended up dropping an unexpected clanger in early March, more than 4 months after the game had hit stores. Players soon discovered that the game's 1.002 patch, released on March 7th, accidentally added a debug menu to Spider-Man 2 that was only intended to be used by the devs. This menu allowed players to skip to any chapter they want, activate cheats, view performance data, access scrapped levels, play as Venom anywhere in the game's open world, and even find hints at future DLC drops. It provided players with a fascinating and all too rare glimpse behind the curtain of a AAA behemoth, though Insomniac understandably were not too keen on players getting this unauthorized all-access pass, and they quickly patched Spider-Man 2 to block access to the menu. Unsurprisingly though, some players attempted to find workarounds to maintain access to it, such as cutting their PS5 off from the internet before the new update was delivered. Number 1, accidental incest, The Sims 4. Considering the family-friendly nature of the Sims franchise, objectionable material sneaking its way in is incredibly problematic for EA. All the same, for an entire week in July of 2022, a quality of life update for The Sims 4 accidentally added incest. The update broke something in the game's relationship system, in turn causing family members to start developing romantic feelings for one another. Yuck. Fans widely speculated that the patch's introduction of wants to the game caused a bug in the relationship structure, allowing incestual feelings to run riot throughout the game for a solid 7 days. It's a funny screw up to a point, but if you're super invested in the family unit you've spent potentially years cultivating, it can be understandably nauseating to see brother and sister pining for one another. This isn't 12 minutes after all. EA soon delivered a patch to rectify the issue, but honestly, it didn't come soon enough. Thank you.